Pros, where I talk to some of the most interesting and insightful people in the world of cybersecurity. I'm your host, Kayne McGladrey, Field CISO at Hyperproof and Senior IEEE member. And today I'm joined by Nigel Sampson of IGG. So Nigel, just to start off, tell the audience a little bit about yourself and also about what IDG does.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Kayne. So I'm a 37-year veteran of IT and information security. I've held a multitude of titles, including network manager, IT director, senior manager of information security, VP of enterprise risk management, and now the head of global cybersecurity for IDG. Of course, that covers a lot of different verticals, including healthcare, payment services, financial services, hotel and casino industry, the transport service industry, and the oil and gas industry. And included in that is a lot of compliance programs. So I've managed a lot of different PCI programs, including some that were the very first time they were going through PCI, very interesting period there, and High Trust, SOC 2, SOC 1, and I also have my CISSP, which I've held since 2018. And you mentioned about IDG and what they do. So as the head of global cybersecurity for IDG, I've been with the company since February 2022. My mandate for them is to build a global cybersecurity program that covers all of IDG's entities. And that means International Data Corporation, which is one of our subsidiaries. They conduct research and analysis in the tech sector, much like a Gartner or a Forrester. They provide insights into subjects such as Gen AI, how it can transform a business, how companies can use data-driven operations to overcome digital disruption. And we also have Foundry Co., which is a little different. They're our marketing and media technology business, and they include brands such as CIO, CISO, Computer World, PC World, Macworld, etc. They also provide lead generation technology for business-to-business buyers in the tech industry.
Yeah, I remember that's a great introduction. I remember being out at the Foundry, well, the IDG, I guess, campus offices out near Boston earlier this year, where Scott Schober, Tanisha Martin, and I had a chat on cybersecurity. Really liked the campus, and I wanted to ask, and also for our audience, where are you based at? Are you able to work from home? Do you go into the office on a regular basis, or is it kind of a blend for you?
So it's a little bit of a blend. I'm actually a remote worker, so I'm based in Southern Maine. It's about 2 hours to get to Needham, which is a relatively new office for us. And it's a really nice campus. I actually enjoy going into the office. It's just on the outskirts of Boston, so if I have some executive level meetings or if I need to meet with a vendor, it's a great spot to meet them and have that. So I normally go in for a couple of days a month now to take care of those meetings.
That's cool. Yeah, it seemed to be a very nice modern campus, and I remember the coffee was good, which is how I think I pretty much evaluate offices at this point, is whether or not their coffee is. I myself, I work from home, have for years, but I've gone to offices before, and usually it's just the coffee is how I evaluate them. But we're in October now, and for our first topic, and also I'll say this for our audience that's watching on either YouTube or on LinkedIn, if you have questions for Nigel, just drop them in the chat on your respective meeting platform, and not meeting platform, streaming platform. There we go. And we will take those live as we go. But right now we're in October. It's not quite yet halfway, though I have put the pumpkins out on the front stoop, and I've started writing automation code for my outdoor lights to actually have them look all spooky and stuff. What are your thoughts, Nigel, about October being recognized as Cybersecurity Month? I think we've been doing this for, what, 20 years or so, 20, 25 years, Cybersecurity Month. Do you find it's helpful?
I appreciate the recognition and the spotlight on cybersecurity that I think it was the government created back in 2003. It's why is it a month, right? It should be the 12 months of cybersecurity. But it does highlight the need to focus on cybersecurity, which is a good thing. It heightens the awareness of the risks. I don't think that it underscores the need for a continuous focus on cybersecurity. So I just don't think it goes far enough. I think, you could, with the government, like especially with the SEC trying to create new compliance rules around cybersecurity and breach notifications,
Mm-hmm.
I think the government should be more forthcoming with maybe more tools in helping at least small and medium-sized businesses with how they can identify risk, how they can conduct risk remediation. I know a lot of it is to do with individuals, but if companies actually train their employees on how to spot phishing emails, those employees can then use that in their personal life, right? So, I think it just needs to be broader. The message needs to be broader, have more content and more tooling to kind of educate people.
Yeah, I think a lot of the media push on Cybersecurity Month is really around individual contributors and individuals
Yeah.
and members of the public rather than actual companies. I also think a lot of marketing managers out there right now have October being labeled as Cybersecurity Month on their marketing content calendar, where they're like, we're going to put out spooky stuff for spooky season, and October is Cybersecurity Month, and that'll be our marketing campaigns done and dusted. I like though you talked about involving companies as part of this, and have you seen how organizations could extend that focus on cybersecurity to be beyond just October to those 12 months of cybersecurity that you said, and make it a more ingrained part of their culture?
Yeah, I think that's you start with cybersecurity awareness training for that, right? Because I'm actually developing a cybersecurity awareness training program for the company. We've had parts of it, but we want to consolidate and make it or improve the content. And it's more than just phishing campaigns, right? It's more than just annual training. It should be more focused on particular parts of the area, particular parts of the business, such as sales, because they travel a lot. So there might be some sales training that you can share with them, how to secure your laptop, how not to use unsecured Wi-Fi, those kinds of things. So I think cybersecurity awareness training to kind of get the message out, but also follow up with continuous communication, which is sending out just an email with a bulletin or an update.
Mhm.
I think providing notifications around scams and phishing. Just in the US, for example, the IRS scans come out in January because people are going to file their taxes, or around holidays, there's always some kind of scam. So I think continuous communication, security awareness, you really have to garner some executive level sponsorship for that as well.
Mhm.
And I think that helps to ingrain cybersecurity into the corporate culture.
Yeah, and I love that you've got that multifaceted approach of trying to, it's not just security people talking about security for security's sake, but you're actually trying to bring in different parts of the business, which I think historically CISOs have either intentionally or unintentionally siloed themselves. And I can't see that being a winning strategy going forward for a CISO to sit in their ivory tower, especially if their ivory tower is reporting to the director of IT, who reports to the vice president of IT, who reports to the CIO, because that's a CISO in title only. But what have you found in terms of like communications? Is that becoming increasingly important as an effective CISO?
So yes, the communication um, is definitely a skill, right? That you have to have any because you have to talk at many different levels, and so coming from an audit background as well, so I have a technical and an audit background. You kind of have to express findings in certain ways to boards or executive level management. So how you express risk items to technical folks who then may have to then express those risks to a board when you have multiple layers of management in a way, you have to very carefully kind of walk them through um, what's a risk, why is it a risk, how is it affecting the company and the business, and what we need to do to treat that risk, right? So, and then they have to express that, and it can be arduous at sometimes and difficult, but you still have to get the message across. So yes, it's more of an art than a science. So, and it takes a lot of practice. And of course, as you move from business to business, they're dealing with different personalities and different skill levels. So you have to express it differently. So it's definitely a skill.
Yeah, and because you've changed between so many different organizations and types of organization, I want us to move next to talking about building security and cybersecurity programs, or information security, or whatever we used to call it back in the day. But before that, I want to remind the audience, if you've got a question for Nigel, just drop it in the chat. We will see it on the right-hand or left-hand side of our screen, respectively, and you can ask us questions live. And so, Nigel, you've been doing this for, you said, 36 years.
Yeah,
I think you said,
37
yeah,
years
okay,
IT
37.
security.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
risk and security probably the last 23 years. Yeah.
Yeah, all right. So, how do you really, when you're working with a new company, or when you're moved into an existing company, or just in general, like how do you go about identifying the most critical business assets and business operations, and how does that really influence your cybersecurity strategy?
So I firstly engaged with the senior level internal stakeholders to understand what's important to them, what's critical to them. And that gives me an idea of those critical assets that could impact business operations and revenue. Right? I'll also talk to the IT team, and if there is a cyber team, I'll talk to them as well to identify what kind of technical controls do we have around those critical assets. If there's a compliance program, I'll look at the recent compliance audit to see, did we just get over the mark to pass, or did we clear it, and cover all the domains? You can look at PCI and high trust and very different compliance programs that they don't cover the complete environment of a business when it comes to risk landscape. So I'd also ask some questions around, have you looked at security solutions but never had the budget for it? Are there gaps? I mean, I'll identify the gaps that I see. I'll ask things like, do we have a secure email gateway? Because effectively, that's a way you can prevent phishing and malware.
Mm-hmm.
Is there MFA in place? So do we have it for the whole enterprise, or do we just have it for VPN, or both? And then as I start looking at the controls that we have in place, and then I'll identify the gaps. And also, I'm kind of doing a risk analysis along the way. Then I can formulate a cybersecurity strategy that will map to the business objectives. Of course, that will take probably a couple of months to do, maybe 2 or 3 months. And then you also have to present that to the executive team, the board, before you get approval. So it can be some time before that actual strategy is approved. And it varies from organization based on size and whatnot. So
Yeah, it's
that's
probably
kind of
your traditional 100-day plan, right? For cybersecurity, for every new CISO takes a job, like within the first 100 days, you have to hit this watermark and have a plan informed on, as you said, critical assets, but also prior art that exists in the organization and their maturity level, right?
Exactly. So for me, I got into just a quick side story. I got into auditing by mistake. I was minding the
How do you
shop.
get into auditing by mistake? Do you just like end up at the wrong bar one night and talk to somebody and you get a new career as an auditor?
I ran my own business for 10 years, and one of my first customers, was a good friend of mine, a CFO for a community bank, and he was out of town, and he asked me to look after the auditors. Well, I was asking them more questions than they were asking me, and then before you know it, they said, would you come and work for us and do some technical audits for our financial institution customers? And I said, well, I'm a technical guy. I don't write reports. I did 2 audits, and I thought, this is very interesting. And it was kind of exciting. So I went down that path, and I ended up doing about 60 financial services audits. I did 10 SOC 2 audits and traveled around the world doing it before settling down and getting a proper job. But it was really exciting, and it opened my eyes to a lot of different risk environments. And financial services are one of the most heavily regulated industries. So understanding the compliance that they have to go through and helping these financial institutions gain that compliance, identify the findings at a technical level, and then explaining that at the board level. I honed my skill in communications that way. So I can look at organizations holistically and identify a lot of the technical issues and then express that, in the exit conference. So it was a good learning experience.
Yeah, I think that is. And that kind of goes to my next question that I had, because when we talk to boards, we often, CISOs have historically been criticized because we put up, the red, green, yellow stoplight chart with 50 blinky lights that nobody actually ever understands. And I think that we haven't historically done a great job of showing our impact at a business level. And so I wanted to ask what metrics you use to evaluate the effectiveness of your cybersecurity in terms of a positive impact, or hopefully a positive impact, that you're making on the business.
So sometimes companies, uh, their boards will have certain ways in which they want the information presented, right? So they'll ask the specific KPIs. But for me, if I look at just the effectiveness of the program itself, I'm looking at things like the amount of malware detection or prevention, right? Blocked phishing emails, vulnerability reduction is a big one because that covers a lot of different areas, whether it exists on the application side or the network side, even external exposure with your attack surface management. That will identify your external exposures. So I look for trend histories, and that then I can provide how the cyber program is being affected through those types of metrics. Attack surface management is relatively a new thing, especially for me, at least. And that has given me a fantastic view into any entity as part of the corporation that has external exposure, and I can measure that, and I can measure the my vulnerability management program effectiveness through that. So, and those are just a few. Okay, mm-hmm. So I can get into risk registers, and you can track those through a POAM, and you can wrap it all up into a risk summary if you like. So it's a little bit technical, and it's a little bit just risk management.
But I'm also hearing there's a lot of collaboration required because your single team probably doesn't own all of that within your average organization. And I wanted to ask about how you're working with other departments or teams within your organization to make sure that your controls are effective and actually supporting your business objectives.
So that requires a lot of communication. It's a lot of collaboration. We have to work with IT ops a lot of the time because obviously we can't deploy our systems or our solutions without their assistance. So it's normally a close collaboration, and we have to dovetail our solutions, or at least the timeline for the roadmap, into their schedule as well, and into that. So that's why project management becomes key there, right? Now, it's not just IT ops we work with. We also work with legal because we do reviews of the security sections of MSAs. So we have to work with their process. They may have a separate process and how they deal with those and when they want us to come into the fold, and I'll start reviewing those. And DevOps development teams, our solutions will actually impede them sometimes because when they don't have a separate dev test QA environment, they're normally doing it in the corporate production environment, which means that when you start overlaying corporate controls, it impacts them. They can't then develop how they want to develop, which is basically in this wide open space where they can blow up things and they can do whatever they want, which is what they're, that's what they do. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of communication, collaboration, planning, in planning our implementation of our programs to ensure that, yes, our controls are going to impact the business, but minimizing that timeline of impact as well. So yes,
now, and as an auditor, I have to ask as well, because I asked about, just checking that the controls are actually working. How often do you get down into the weeds of asking, like, is this control even sensible? And I'll give you an example. There was a well, there was a company I worked with in Canada a few years back, and they had a requirement that they change all of their passwords for their service accounts every X duration, and I think it was something like 90 days or so. And you'd think most sensible people would go, okay, cool, I can buy a solution that will rotate passwords on it. No, they worked with their local college to get a crop of interns, and the crop of interns would come in, they'd open up the Excel spreadsheet, passwords.xls, they would update all of the service account passwords and never want to work in IT again. Technically speaking, is the control operational? Yes. Is it effective? Yes. Was it designed correctly? I mean, I kind of took them to task over how silly it was. But do you get into that level of detail too now, or are you delegating that task out of evaluating, like, does this control even make sense how we're doing it anymore?
Yes, there's some processes that um, that need a review, right? Quarterly access reviews and stuff. Those kinds of SOPs. I get my team members to create SOPs whenever they can, because that can be shared with other people. But I won't get into the weeds as to the minute detail of the SOP. I'll just say let's build an SOP for a QAR, and maybe we can build a policy out of it, and let's just make sure that it's conducted appropriately, that it covers everything that we need to cover. So the process is key, right? But
Mhm.
actually getting into it and actually defining it and reviewing it, I wouldn't actually do it because, you know, at my level, I just can't spend the time to get into every single. I'm still, I'm still trying to help with building business processes that can be more secure and efficient, because maybe they built something that um, works, like you said, it works. Don't touch it. But if it's worked and you haven't touched it in 10 years, then there's going to be some kind of problem, right? So those are the things where it's like, oh, there's a better way to do it. You can do it more securely, maybe more efficiently, but let's test it, work together, figure out the solution, and work that way. So, I can't, on the tech side, it's like, it's difficult to get into the minutiae of, do we have a process for changing passwords for service accounts?
Yeah, yeah,
We
it's a
probably,
bit weighty, though. I think as CISOs, we are going to see and are seeing the incident response plans that we've written over the years, especially for those of us at publicly traded companies. We definitely have to reevaluate those in light of the new SEC materiality determination. And like I'm sure you've talked to a lot of CISOs about this as well, around how that's really forcing conversations, because it's got that 4 days to file your 8K if you decide if something is material. It's forcing conversations to, first of all, define what the heck does material mean qualitatively and quantitatively. And also, I think it's a lot of companies I've talked to are not trying this process out. They're just going to hope for the best. I have talked to a couple folks who are tabletopping their new disclosure just to see how it would feel. Where are you on that? I don't think you're not at a publicly traded company, right? It's still privately owned.
no, no. And I have worked for publicly traded companies, and it's it's going to be difficult because the government hasn't even stated, okay, they have to be very specific about how they determine what a breach is, what's a security event, what's a security incident, and what do they need to provide as reporting,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, when people say, well, you know, we need to know when you have a security incident. Do you really want to know that? Because I'll just give you all of my phone data that we're blocking, and that's going to be hundreds of thousands of pages. Really, what you're getting at is, do you have a material incident? When, to me, that means something that's affected the business operation or revenue for the company. Um, that is a material incident in my mind. So companies, yes, they're going to take what the government says and they're going to say, well, this doesn't mean that, so I don't have to report it. And the government's going to be kind of, okay, we're going to have to rewrite this. And that's going to take multiple iterations. So this is going to take 3 to 5 years before we get to something that's like, okay, clear cut and makes sense. Now we know what we have to do as a publicly traded company
Makes
to breach
makes a lot of
everything.
sense there. Yeah, and documenting that really, I think, is the
Yeah,
other
exactly.
key
Yeah.
aspect of this. Is there is going to be a lot of paperwork. But we also have a question in the chat, and if you do have questions for Nigel, do drop them in the chat. I'm going to read this one as written, and it says, the position of a CISO is often seen as a high pressure role given the nature of the risks involved. How do you manage this pressure, and what advice would you give to aspiring CISOs?
So actually, this is why I love working for IDG. We actually have a company called Bright Breaks, which is they offer these 7-minute breaks. Whenever you have a break in your schedule, whether it's to do stretch or whether it's to stand up and move around or just do breathing exercises, it takes away from sitting down and just focus on something completely different for 7 minutes, and then you can get back to what you're doing. And that kind of relieves that constant stress. You sit down at the desk and you work for 8 to 10 hours, and then you're exhausted and you haven't even got up out of your chair the whole time. It really does help with mental mindfulness throughout the day. It's 7 minutes. So, I mean, you can always fit 7 minutes here or there just to take that break. And I actually really enjoy that. So I can't do it all the time. I'll book them and I can't make them sometimes. But it's a little bit of that, but it's also at the end of the day, knowing when to kind of stop work and break away and just not constantly think about it. But you have to be organized to do that. And you have to have a good team that manages your SOC or your application security or risk and compliance, and rely heavily on those teams to make sure that they're taking care of things. I make sure that they will escalate anything to me that needs to be escalated, but I let them almost be autonomous because I know they're good at what they do. They report to me regularly. We have regular meetings. We have one-on-ones. Communication is key, and that's why I've had former employees reach out to me, want to come back to work for me because that's how I work. And I've built successful cybersecurity programs that way with really good small teams that can do a lot of things. They work as a team, and they're very highly effective.
Yeah, I think you've got a great point there around delegating and trust and autonomy, because I think CISOs who micromanage probably are going to be a dying breed. I mean that in the best possible way. They'll just select out of it as opposed to the associated mental health and stress things. But I also love that point about 7-minute breaks. I think most people figured out I'm standing. I have a standing desk. That's one of the ways that I deal. But what was the name of that 7-minute break thing again? Just one more time for the stream.
Bright Breaks.
Bright Breaks. Okay, I might check that into that one just myself. When I travel, I have a 7-minute workout that I do. It's absolutely miserable. You can do it in a hotel room. It makes you regret those 7 minutes, but it makes you healthy as well. And that's one of those things that's necessary. I see we have another question in the chat. Oh yeah, exactly. We have another question in the chat, and I love this. If you have more questions for Nigel, keep dropping them in the chat. And the question is, how practical is the implementation of a zero trust model for organizations? Oh boy. And what are the common challenges faced during its adoption? And I say, oh boy, just as context, because a lot of CISOs are not taking the term zero trust very favorably anymore. It's often like marketecture. Nigel, what do you think?
Marketecture, yeah, very good. Yeah, so I look at zero trust as it's more a philosophy. It is a marketing tool. It's like, okay, I understand why they're applying it, how you apply it. Sure, if you look at zero trust network or network filtering, you can call it that. You can call it secure access service edge. There's all these fancy acronyms that you can apply to zero trust network access and all that kind of stuff. But yes, applying it, it's a very good solution. Because you can envelop a lot of different use cases into that solution because of how it's deployed and what it does and how it handles the traffic and the endpoints and data. You get very good visibility and very good control. And for me, it's one of the cornerstones of the cybersecurity program. If you're fortunate enough to be able to deploy something like this. For us, it's essential because we have 3 different business organizations. We have a lot of people that travel, and we're in 60 countries. So something like this allows us to centralize our security control set, get visibility, and apply policies. So yes, it can be tricky to deploy. It can be impactful sometimes. But again, I go back to when you're deploying a cybersecurity program or any solution, you're going to hit problems, you're going to impact somebody, there's going to be feedback, but it's how you address it and how you get over that and get to where you need to, which is a stable and secure environment for everybody.
I think that's a very well-rounded answer there. If you've got more questions for Nigel, please drop them in the chat. For our third topic today, I wanted to talk about places where there is less of a mature program or where there just isn't a mature program, because I think you've audited and assessed those and also worked in them. I know I have audited and assessed them and worked in them. And I wanted you to discuss some of the most pressing challenges you've faced as a CISO in an organization that doesn't have a mature cybersecurity program.
So my initial challenge is going to be budget, because if there isn't a semblance of a mature cyber program, it's normally down to nobody has spent the money, but the reason for that is nobody has assessed the risk or presented the risk. So then my job is to assess the risk and then provide not only what the cost is, but what's going to prevent additional cost, meaning if you do have a security breach, what's the impact to the business, right? So I think MGM stating that it's going to cost them $110 million now for the breach that just recently occurred. And that's what companies are going to spend millions of dollars to rectify those issues. So if I go into a company and I see a lack of a mature cyber program, I'll do the risk assessment. I'll provide the numbers of, the average cost of a security breach is $4.5 million. The average security incident could be $600,000, $700,000. So for small companies, that can be impactful to their bottom line. And do you want to spend $100,000, $200,000 on a cyber program, or do you want to spend it giving it to other people, or losing your business and costing you more money? Sometimes reputational risk can't be quantified, so you can only quantify that by saying if you lose 30% of your customers or 30% of your revenue, does that resonate? And that's how you basically communicate risk. Communicating dollars to the board and to the executive team.
Yeah, I think you raise a really interesting point there, because you've brought in MGM into the chat, and I'm also thinking of Progress Software, which makes MoveIt, as well as Clorox, where we have 3 very prominent breaches. MoveIt is just the gift that keeps on giving, and yet if I look at their stock price, they lost a tiny bit, and their disclosure was, it didn't really affect them that much. And then you look at Clorox, they make bleach as well as other things. They're absolutely getting pummeled because their manufacturing capacity has been degraded as a consequence of that. Do you think reputational risk still and the potential of stock market penalties and repercussions is still a meaningful message for a lot of companies? Just give myself, I've seen people still shop at Target, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they had a bad day, but people have gone back.
So I've looked at that before, because I've known companies that have gone through an incident. Their stock price could drop anywhere from 3 to 10% over a 30, 60-day period. But what you find is that their PR is very good at telling the public and their customers what they're doing to prevent the next event from happening. And that's obviously requires maturing the program, spending money on solutions and people, and ensuring that customers are remain safe. So sometimes it's actually after that's happened, it's sometimes better to go back to them because they've already spent a lot of money. They've done the risk assessments now. They know what the gaps are. They've put in the solutions. They've got the team, and now they're in a much better place. So that's why you'll see publicly traded companies. They'll take an initial hit, but then after a time, they'll come back because they've remediated those risk items. They've cleaned their environments and they're back in business. So I think that's for some companies, yes, they'll say it didn't really affect us. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it affected 1% of their environment. Other companies, like the MGM, it's glaringly obvious because you've got 100, 200 people at the room res where they can't book in. They can't use ATMs. I mean, that's a nightmare scenario for them.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with MGM because I have on background that Lena Khan, who is the chairwoman of the FTC, was trying to check in at an MGM property and had to give her personal identifiable information on a piece of paper to somebody to be like, here, I'm like the FTC chairwoman, take my details down and I'll hope for the best. Like, I can't imagine that's going to go really well from them from a regulatory perspective, but casinos are not that regulated as an industry, right? I mean, they've got the Nevada Gaming Commission, but beyond
So
that,
I used to manage the network for the Rio Hotel when it was owned by the Monells. It's owned by Harrah's. I think it's even owned by maybe MGM or Caesars now. But so that when I was telling you about the room res, we actually had when I'd left, I'd heard about an incident where they changed type of VLAN that they were using, and it knocked out half the network, and the whole room res went down. So that means people are screaming and shouting that they want to go on vacation, they want to get to their room,
right?
and they've got all their luggage with them, and but when you have a security incident, it's not a system that you can just fix very quickly. When it's ransomware and it's affected all of those terminals, that's going to take potentially days to remediate. So
Which
it
is
was
what
a
I think we
huge
saw
incident,
with MGM, and their business continuity plans seem to be. I'm not sure if they tested it out beforehand.
right? And so that's where in those instances your BCP comes in. You if you've got a BCP, you should normally do like a business impact analysis, so you know how long a system can be down before it really affects something, and then you have to go to your backup systems or you have to do a restore, whatever. But yes, BCP is critical in those instances.
Yeah, and we've talked a little bit around this, so I want to get your take on it. We've talked about regulated industries, non-regulated industries, public companies, non-public companies. From your perspective, how does operating in a regulated industry as opposed to a non-regulated one really affect the approach that you take to build and maintain cybersecurity controls?
So yeah, the controls can be different. File integrity monitoring, for example, in some industries, they don't necessarily need it, but in others, they're required because of compliance. So your tool sets and your solutions are going to be different. So yes, the strategy for the cyber program has to be customized based on the regulation. But if you're not regulated, then now you're looking at solely protecting the business assets and applying the appropriate controls around that. So, and that means that there are some solutions that are not necessary for that. So, yeah, it's definitely a big difference. But if you look at security domains, they apply to every business, no matter what, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the solutions that might be different. So, but you always want to have your cyber program meet a standard, which some, regulated industries may follow anyway. ISO certification, NIST, SOC 2, SOC audits, not necessarily. Sometimes they do ask for that, but um, regulatory agencies normally have a specific compliance program that you follow, and you have to build a program against.
But I do like that we've also institutionalized that knowledge and you're just leveraging that as opposed to, like, if you think back 20, 30 years ago, we were making some of this stuff up as we went, right? Like there might have, I remember having like the gold book for Unix on my desk years ago, and that was how we did network security and Unix level security, but there was no overarching control framework. We've definitely matured in that regard as an industry, and we can leverage established precedent and established frameworks and standards, which I think helps in those regulated industries, as you said.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, they continue to evolve, right? There'll be probably NIST will come out with an AI standard that people can follow. There'll probably be an ISO certification for using AI or something along those lines. But it's going to evolve. It has to evolve as technology evolves.
Definitely. And I see we have another question in the audience chat. So again, thank you for asking questions. And the question is, what are the things you consider when trying to build your budget requests for your team?
So first of all, I need to identify if it fits the gaps that we've identified in the risk assessment, initial risk analysis. And I look for, are those solutions, do they have any administrative overhead? Are they easy to use? Because with a small team, it has to be able to present the information they need very quickly. Over and above that, I look at the reporting aspect. I think it was 2016, I deployed CrowdStrike, and their reporting was terrible. And I love pulling reports because I like to see trending. And they said, yeah, we don't really have that. So like, it was a great tool. It's still a great tool, but they didn't have the reporting aspect. So I'm like, okay, it's still a great tool. It's not that I'm going to, I have to build my own reports out of it. So when I look at solutions and I look at budgeting, it's normally, is this solution going to fit the gap? And are there as effective solutions at lower cost? Because sometimes they're going to be too expensive and there's going to be alternatives. So I will normally look at 2 to 3 alternatives and get the pricing for those as well so I can compare. I have the luxury of working with IDC, so
yeah, you've got access to live research that many of us, well, you probably don't have to pay for it, or if it is, it's probably some like super special back deal. Yeah.
And so it's very beneficial for me to look at and say, okay, yeah, that's the right solution, and compare pricing and notes.
That is cool, but I'm hearing there is still some price comparison and shopping, and as well as functionality shopping there, really to map to the risk that you're trying to meet and the gap that you have faced.
And normally, with more than 4,000 vendors in the cybersecurity space, you're going to find another solution that can compare to what you've shopped for. And sometimes they're better, sometimes they're not. But you can definitely shop around for alternatives.
Very cool. Well, I think we've got time for one more audience question before we need to start wrapping up. And the audience question is, how do you identify and track the most critical controls in your security program? As you have multiple frameworks and likely 100 or more controls, I imagine it's hard to track control effectiveness across that set.
So the control effectiveness might come from the KPIs. Right? Because I'm expecting these controls to do certain things and report on certain things, and I'm expecting thresholds to be met in some respects. But I look at that holistically. So I rely heavily on the KPIs for that. The reporting aspect again is I want to see. It's going to tell me itself. The solution will tell me itself how effective it is just by running reports. And saying, okay, we blocked 10,000 phishing emails last month, or malware, or we have identified, 5 instances where somebody installed something and it contained malware. I look at those kind of metrics on a regular basis to make sure that yes, those solutions are doing what they're supposed to. I actually had one solution, a well-known EDR solution, where my weekly reports had nothing in them. And, it's like, well, that's not a good thing, right? So,
yeah, that's concerning.
It is concerning. So, I'll ping them and say, hey, what's the deal? I need to get that information so I can see that the solution is being effective. So, that's that respect. If I go one step up and I'm looking at a risk landscape, I'm looking at like risk registers, and now I'm looking at, specific risk items and then tracking them over time. That includes vulnerability. So I look at vulnerability management as well. So, there's all different types of KPIs I can use and pull, and then I look at risk registers and we kind of pull it all together to summarize, okay, we are either in a good space or an okay space, or some areas need attention and some controls may need configuring, or we need to get a new control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's so it sounds like you're still getting the product level reports and also still, evaluating those. It's an interesting strategy. Myself, I've got the luxury of at least not having to look at the product specific reports. They get rolled into a dashboard that gets tied back to risk. Because for me, honestly, I don't care how many malware attempts were blocked. I care that the thing's working. The team that's responsible for the malware, they will bloody well care that the malware is being blocked. I just need to know, is the control still like you said, the example of where it sent blank reports, that would cause me to go, okay, what went wrong here? But as a CISO, I don't need that level of detail.
Right, and that's the end goal, right? Because I'm building the program. This isn't a mature program where I'm like, okay, I have all this stuff. I need to pull the metrics and the reporting together and put it in the dashboard. We haven't got to the full suite of solutions yet. And we do have our dashboards, and those are developing over time as we build the program. Mm-hmm. So we are, as you say, looking at those. But as we build the program, I have to make sure that those control sets and products are implemented correctly. They're providing the solution that we expected, and that data then rolls up into the dashboard. So definitely. It's evolving over time, and I'm hoping, at some point I'll be like one of those, high level CISOs where they just sit in their executive chair and they just look at a dashboard and saying, yeah, everything's green, I'm happy.
Oh, that sounds like a wonderful reality. I'm not sure anybody's actually got that. Can you imagine going to your office and everything being green one day? I'd probably ask, like, so what's broken because something's not reporting. There's usually something going on.
There's always going to be a problem.
Yeah. Otherwise, what would we do all day, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think we've pretty much we've hit about time for this, Nigel. I want to thank you for having me on the show. And any closing thoughts for our viewers about any of the topics we've covered, or any wisdom you want to impart to everyone?
Yeah, I would probably say look out for AI coming into cybersecurity fairly soon. I think AI is going to impact not just cybersecurity, but a lot of different parts of the business. They'll probably find that various departments are already playing with ChatGPT and some other Gen AI products that now you have to be super diligent in how the business is using AI and start looking at multiple frameworks where you can cobble together a risk assessment to identify how AI is imposing risk on the business. So that's probably the main one, because that's topic of conversation everywhere, and it's going to be very impactful over the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I think you got a great point there. So here's your to-do list item out of this is go update your risk assessment plan for 2024 to include questions for the business about, so AI, what you doing with it? And are there any risks as we incorporate it into our businesses?
Yeah.
Cool.
Definitely.
Well, with that, Nigel, it's been a pleasure. Enjoy the fall weather. I know you're in a beautiful part of the country. And if you've enjoyed this show, please hit the like button on LinkedIn to make sure you get notified. Either that, or if you're on YouTube, we also have the same functionality. And with that, we will shut down. Nigel, thanks so much for being a guest today. And great talking to you again.
Thank you.